we see, especially in the post-pandemic period, is that the world economy has showed a degree of adaptability because supply-side disruptions have eased compared to the worst years. Inflation has moderated in many places, and real incomes have improved for segments of households. But resilience is really not the same as robustness, as there are three main divergent forces that are impeding on growth. Trade has been historically an engine of convergence, allowing developing countries to catch up with advanced economies, but it is no longer providing the same impulse. WTO projections show sharply moderated trade expansion, with global merchandise trade growth for 2026 projected at 0.5%, which is sharply down from the forecast earlier. So under the circumstance, what are the medium-term policies for resilience and transformation? The theme of the TGM is promoting sustainable, inclusive, and job-rich economic transformation. The question is how a country transforms a period of steady and sluggish growth into inclusive and sustainable transformation. As the 2020s threaten to become a decade marked by sluggish growth, policymakers must respond with bold and comprehensive strategies. Our deliberations in 2026 TGM will focus on the key issues relating to the Bretton Woods at 80 reform initiative, which is not really a replacement of the system, but a call for renewal and rebirth. So with that brief introductory remarks, may I now call on the coordinating minister of the economy and the chair of the G24 for 2025-2026, Mr. Olawale Edwin.
This gathering is not just a routine technical engagement. It is an opportunity to reshape the development trajectory, particularly for us, particularly for the Global South, at a time when global risks are converging faster, it seems, than institutions can respond. The context is one of fragmentation versus integration, and the global economic landscape is rapidly evolving to what is called by analysts, and they like to, stylize and phrase these events. It's called the age of competition. Half of the experts surveyed by the World Economic Forum recently, they expect the world to remain turbulent over the next 2 years or so, and 57% foresee instability over the next decade, while only 1% anticipate a calm environment. His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, his broad economic strategy is anchored on a bold, I would say, three-phase program of market correction, stabilization, and growth acceleration. So, we need a robust reform agenda. And for that, the G24 must articulate a unified and solutions-oriented vision. So we need to reform the global financial architecture, strengthen the global safety net, expand concessional financing with the multilateral development banks, and prioritize local currency financing, digital payments, and regional development banks as some of the things that we think should be on the agenda. The era of trickle-down prosperity from the north has passed. The flows are now negative from south to north. It's like water going uphill, but that's the reality of today. The future belongs to regions that collaborate, innovate, and integrate with purpose. Together, the Global South can build an economy that is integrated by choice, resilient by design, and inclusive by nature. I thank you for listening.
So let me now give the microphone to Governor Cardoso. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is a great honor for me to welcome you to Abuja for the 2026 G24 Technical Group meetings. This gathering comes at a crucial time as technological shifts are transforming global trade, payments, and financial integration across the globe. This underscores why the overarching theme, mobilizing finance for sustainable, inclusive, and job-rich transformation, is not only timely, but perfectly suited. Today, cross-border payments remain too slow, too costly, and too fragmented, especially for developing economies. With global remittance corridors costing over 6%, settlement lags of several days, and compliance burdens that exclude MSME, millions remain disconnected from global opportunity. At the Central Bank of Nigeria, we have systematically modernized our regulatory and supervisory frameworks to keep pace with the rapidly evolving digital financial landscape. We strengthened operational oversight of switching and payment infrastructure providers, enhanced agent banking regulations to better address AML/CFT risks, and significantly improved interoperability across payment channels to support efficiency and scale. Beyond efficiency gains, digital cross-border payments are reshaping global finance itself. They are enabling local currency settlement in cross-border trade, new channels for South-South financial integration, reduced dependence on a limited set of reserve currencies, and more efficient transmission of global and regional capital flows. Success should be measured not only by speed and cost reductions, but by preservation of monetary and financial stability, inclusion of EMDs in governance and rule setting, and resilience of payment systems to shocks. Nigeria is honored to host this important meeting, and the Central Bank of Nigeria remains committed to working with fellow G24 members, the IMF, the World Bank Group, and other partners to build a financial system that is more inclusive, more resilient, and more development-oriented. I wish you all fruitful deliberations, and I thank you for your attention.
We are in excellent hands today as Daniel commences the discussion. Thank you very much. Daniel, over to you.
There are many dimensions to this dynamic, but I would like to zero in on one relevant to the discussion today. The rules were largely written at a time when much of today's Global South was absent from the room, and too often thereafter present only at the margins. As a result, the benefits of the system have never been shared proportionally. In that sense, while Carney characterizes the moment that we're going through as a rupture of the system, I would surmise that instead we're simply witnessing a deepening of dynamics that have long shaped developing countries' engagement with the international system. The international financial architecture illustrates this with particular clarity. Structural asymmetries deeply embedded in it are not a bug, but a feature of this system. Decision-making remains concentrated, with developing countries underrepresented relative to their economic weight in the global economy. A small number of currencies sit atop a hierarchy where liquidity and financing are abundant for some, but not for others. Debt contracts are underwritten and adjudicated under foreign law and judges. And when crises hit, the burden of adjustment has tended to fall disproportionately on those with the least policy space and the most urgent development needs. Today, we are fortunate to be joined by two distinguished voices in this debate, Dr. Bhattacharya and Dr. Ocampo. I would like to first yield the floor to Dr. Bhattacharya.
There is no doubt that Bretton Woods era has been the golden era for development. When you look at reduction in poverty, improvements in living standards, not even, but just immense nevertheless, and especially if you look at human development and the conditions of human life. You know, the last 80 years have been unique in terms of the progress made. If you look at the next, 20, 25 years, we will add 1.8 billion people to the planet, all of them in the developing world. As the minister pointed out, we will be adding 1.2 billion young people to the labor force. So unless we invest in the human capital, unless we invest in these people, it will be an opportunity lost and it will be a problem created. And finally, I would always end by the incomplete business of voice and reform in the institutions. I know this has been a G24 agenda, for decades. We have made some progress, but the reality is that voice and governance in these institutions still remains extremely imbalanced. And one point I want to make is the complexity of voice and governance is that it is linked to issues of quotas and issues to World Bank capital.
I would like to yield the floor to Professor Jose Antonio Castro. Here.
The terms of instruments, aside from loans, it's important to also to do equity financing and, very importantly, guarantees in order to enhance private sector financing, for example, in climate and other objectives. Just in the case of multilateral banks, it's important to see that there has been a significant increase in financing for climate that I show here since the second half of the 2010s. But I find problematic the fact that it fell in 2024 and maybe in 2025. Actually, the opposition to financing of climate is an important point. On sovereign debt crisis, this is a topic that actually Amar already mentioned. First of all, we need to create an ad hoc mechanism to manage the current debt crisis, which could be the expansion of the common framework for debt treatments, but it has to be significantly improved because it has been very hard to use only by a few African countries, and the mechanism has to include middle-income countries. Because there is also a major problem in the case of middle-income countries, as I'll show you graphically. And finally, build a tensor global architecture with a strong regional institutions. So it's as a South-South cooperation system, a stronger South-South cooperation system, which is very important. And in my view, in the case of development bank, there is an advance, but this is an area in which we have nothing in terms of international monetary cooperation.
Thank you, Professor Campo, for your intervention. I think the two presentations provided a very comprehensive overview of the limitations of the international financial architecture. And I would like now to call the representative of the Ministry of Finance of South Africa, followed by the representative of the Islamic Development Bank.
Firstly, on the relevance of the BWIs today, we believe they are very relevant and their role continues to be important. The IMF has a unique mandate that benefits both developed and developing countries. The World Bank, on the other hand, can be considered the trailblazer for MDBs globally. Both are especially relevant to Africa. However, there are new challenges and there have been considerable changes in the world impacting these institutions and their adaptability. During our G20 presidency, we focused on further improving the implementation of the common framework. Going forward, we believe that the best track to pursue the debt resolution process is through the common framework.
To put it simply, the Islamic Development Bank Group is a development finance family built around the bank, working across 57 member countries of the OIC through complementary arms that support end-to-end development delivery. Across our member countries, job-rich transformation ultimately depends on the basics: reliable infrastructure, productive agriculture and agro-processing, and human capital that matches labor market needs. Since we are in Nigeria, let me offer one concrete illustration on financing the real economy. As of December 2025, the total Islamic Bank Group disbursements in Nigeria reached $1.1 billion, delivered through multiple arms of the group. This is important because transformation requires a pipeline that reaches beyond a single channel, combining project financing, trade finance, private sector support, and risk mitigation.
I have a special intervention from the floor from the Minister for Budget and Planning of Nigeria, Mr. Abubakar Atiku Bagudu. Please, you have the floor.
Last year, the coordinating minister of the economy hosted African governors of the bank, and a very frustrated minister of finance of one of the countries said how he spent almost 9 years trying to understand the methodology of the credit rating agencies. Reflective of that frustration, yesterday, many Nigerian papers published a reprint from the Financial Times op-ed written by our President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So this discussion, I think, is coming at an appropriate time for Nigeria to contribute. We believe we must be able to evolve market-based system that can underwrite huge financing mechanisms that will ensure that these resources are available to many more countries to fund development and in a sustainable market-friendly manner.
Welcome to this second day of the 2026 TGM of the Group of 24, the Intergovernmental Group of 24. This evolving landscape raises important questions about the scope, tools, and accountability of central banks, particularly in emerging market and developing economies, where macro-financial vulnerabilities and inclusion gaps remain significant. So this panel will examine how central bank can balance multiple objectives, deploy new instruments responsibly, and adapt their mandates and institutional frameworks to maintain credibility, stability, and inclusion in a rapidly changing global financial system. Let me now, at this point, hand over to the Deputy Governor, Monetary Policy at the Central Bank of Nigeria, Dr. Mohammed Sani Abdullahi, Deputy Governor, Economic Policy Directorate of the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Before inviting our lead speakers to share their perspectives, let me offer a few brief remarks to help frame our discussion. Over the past 2 decades, the role of central banks has evolved significantly. While price stability and financial stability remain at the core of our mandates, central banks, particularly in emerging and developing economies, are increasingly expected to engage with broader priorities such as financial inclusion, digitalization, and resilience. This evolution has taken place in a context marked by persistent inflationary pressures, volatile capital flows, climate-related shocks, geopolitical fragmentation, and rapid technological change. Together, these forces have made macroeconomic and financial policy making more complex than ever. Today's panel therefore focuses on a set of critical questions. Firstly, how central banks can balance multiple objectives without undermining credibility or independence. How different policy tools, monetary, macroprudential, regulatory, and digital interact in practice. Third, how fintech and digital financial services are reshaping central bank responsibilities, and how emerging economies can navigate global spillovers and cross-border policy interactions in an increasingly interconnected financial system. With this framing in mind, I very much look forward to the insights from our distinguished speakers and to a rich exchange with members. It is my pleasure to invite Dr. Leon to take the floor and get us started.
Central banks are operating in a world where shocks are more frequent, more correlated, and more non-linear, meaning we have persistent risks, volatile capital flows, rapid financial innovation, climate and nature-related shocks, and accelerating digitalization. We need a systems control perspective. Systems control is better known in the engineering literature, where the goal is not to maximize output in a quarter. The goal is to keep a complex system within a safe operating space over time, so that it performs well under stress. If we apply that logic to macroeconomic management, the objective becomes resilient prosperity, which we can define as durable improvements in well-being and opportunity, but within ecological limits. The task before us is resilient prosperity, anchored in stability, adaptation, and ecological balance. Thank you.
I will now invite Mr. Rewani to take the floor. Please, Mark.
Stability itself is the major cause of instability. In the sense that when people, in stable systems, people, confidence builds, and when confidence begins to grow, people then begin to borrow, and that stability creates a debt pile-up, which itself creates its own instability. Before 1933 and before that time, the semi-gold standard and the various times, American economists showed how debt can cause depression. In 1936, Keynes came up with the whole theory of output prices, and also talked about how you can take an economy out of depression using the Keynesian model. And when asked what happens in the long run, he said in the long run, we are no longer here. Right now, at least for now, government debt is being capped or being managed. Consumer debt in Nigeria is manageable, and corporate debt is being contained. So we see this, and then you say, what next? We expect to see a couple of things. One, like what has happened in the Bank of England, focusing on policies and separating the management of bank supervision, which is the Financial Conduct Authority and Financial Prudent Authority. It's happened in the US. So the policy framework has changed. The policy thinking has changed. People have come to accept that economies are cyclical and that stability breeds instability and instability breeds better management, and then at the end of the day, the economies themselves become much more efficient and translate to serving to the welfare of the people.
I will now open the floor to our distinguished members to present their country perspectives.
On balancing multiple policy objectives, for the South African Reserve Bank, the mandate is clear and constitutionally anchored. Central bank independence, strong governance, policy coordination, clear communication, and policy credibility remains the most effective tools that the central bank have and must utilize. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, South Africa.
I'm sure that a year ago, if we were having this conversation, inflation would have been around 23.8%. The monetary policy rate would have been 27%. The exchange rate would have been 16 cedis to the US dollar. Now, happily today, I'm pleased to report that as of January 2026, inflation has declined to 3.8%. The monetary policy rate is at 15%, with scope for further easing. The cedi is at an average rate of 11 cedis to the US dollar, reflecting an appreciation of over 40%.
In advanced economies, including the US, the Federal Reserve faces growing political pressures. At least some part of these pressures come from the fact that the central bank pursues a dual mandate. Some may consider that the Fed's role has expanded beyond traditional monetary policy. This does not imply that central banks should ignore broader societal challenges. Climate-related risks, financial inclusion, and technological innovation clearly have macro-financial relevance. But central banks should address these issues strictly through their lens of their remits and tools: risk analysis, supervision, financial stability, and the safe and efficient functioning of payment systems, rather than as independent policy objectives.
I would like to concur with some of the ideas already expressed by our main speakers and some of the people from the floor. And I want to focus more closely on what we're seeing in the evolution of financial inclusion. The data is clear with better access to financial services. We're seeing more people being brought into the financial system, expansion of the capital base of banks for that reason. The issue then is, what should a central bank do? I think that the supervision of the financial sector of the banking system has to be robust enough to manage some of these changes and implement, get ahead of the game and get to implement very strong policies that would at least allow the central bank to have a stronger view of what is happening to money, how money is moving, and where it's going, and how the central bank itself can recalibrate its own policies in order to change that, to make a difference.
I really just want to once again thank our presenters, Dr. Leon and Bismarck. Can we get a round of applause for them, please? And to all the countries that have contributed, have listened, and to Dr. Marsha also for putting this together. Thank you very much.